The official Gen 3 tier list has been updated for November 2024, and here it is. Things have changed. We're going to take a look at how the metagame has shifted, what ended up getting ranked officially, and just talking about all these Pokemon briefly and their place in the format right now. It's going to be fun. And we have some resources to look at, including the old viability ranking from 6 months ago, and we can refer to that to see how things have changed, what's gone up, what's gone down. If you don't know how this works, folks, this is not my personal tier list. This is an aggregate ranking of all the top players. So all the top players or people who got high ladder positions, played in tournaments, what have you, have submitted their own personal rankings, and they've been aggregated and averaged with some system that's very smart, made by, I think, Vapakuno and Goldmason are doing that, and they know what they're doing. And it's all been aggregated into one big ranking that is basically a picture of what most players think the metagame looks like at this current moment, which is a useful resource, of course, for new players to take a look. You can have opinions that differ from this, of course. Plenty of players who submitted rankings obviously have different takes from what ended up being the final aggregate ranking, but it's still a useful thing to look at to get a sense of what's good and what's not right now in the eyes of people who are playing the game the most. And it goes all the way down to the E tier, of course, where some interesting stuff is ranked this year, or this 6-month period, that will be fun to take a look at. We also have the spreadsheet we can consult to see who ranked what. Everybody's rankings are here, including ABR, of course. You probably saw my video about that. Ranking Tyranitar 11th, so what's going on with that. Jonald is here, Siglet, McMagan, all the gamers. And so if something's low, we can see who ranked it where, who did that. We have evidence to support ourselves. So let's get into it, folks. And if you're new to Gen 3 and you want a more detailed look into each of these Pokemon, maybe check out one of my older tier lists, like the August 2023 one. It's not going to be up to date to the current metagame exactly, but if you just want a overview of what each Pokemon does, that's pretty much the same still. That hasn't changed. So I won't be going into as much detail here. I will give a brief rundown of what they do, but I'm going to primarily be talking about the metagame shifts and differences between this tier list and previous ones. So first of all, of course, we have Tyranitar, the center of the metagame, and still number one in the eyes of everybody, or mostly everybody, for clear reasons. It creates sand on the field, permanent sand, which is the highest impact thing in the metagame that everything shapes around. It cuts leftovers healing from non-rock grounded steel types, which of course has a significant impact on pretty much the entire format. And not only that, it is a formidable threat itself, especially with the Dragon Dance set, which is a powerful and central presence that you need some sort of response to, or you're just going to get destroyed. Whether that be Swampert to handle it, or Flygon, or a defensive Metagross, or whatever. You need something for that. Maybe Dugtrio in the back pocket. Claydol plus Dugtrio combo deals with it. You need something for it. Tyranitar has a lot of set variety, with Pursuit being a fantastic option that can eliminate Gengar and other ghost types, as well as threatened psychic types, and just be a good special attacker. Beyond that, with fire coverage, grass coverage, ice coverage, whatever, you can run like Sub Punch Tyranitar on Paraspam teams or other teams. Bulky 4 attacks Tyranitar. He's of course very varied. Mixed options, special, physical, utility. He's got it all. He's a fantastic and wonderful Pokemon to use. I love Tyranitar. But how has sentiment changed around Tyranitar recently? I think more people than ever have ranked Tyranitar not number one. We can take a look. McMagan ranked him number 2, behind Skarmory. Jonald, a new rising star in the format, who has gotten good ladder rankings, I believe. Jonald, my arch nemesis as well, ranked Skarm number 1, Blissey number 2, and Tyranitar number 3. We got Peebnupt Bubba, who I think is a Smash player, who also hit number 1 on the ladder recently. Shout out to you. Tar number 2, Empo Tar number 2. So that's quite a few people. Still, look, ones across the board for most of these gamers, but there's a few non-Tar number 1 rankings, so sentiment towards Tar is sort of going down. There's the idea that Tyranitar, while it is probably the most metagame impactful Pokemon in the format, as for people personally using the Pokemon, sandless teams that aim to deal with, sand weak Pokemon such as Blissey, Snorlax, Suicune, Celebi, etc. in other ways are on the rise. ABR, of course, discussed that in his personal ranking, where he has Pokemon like Blissey and Dugtrio high up for their consistency, their power outside of sand, when they're able to heal with leftovers and clear weather after eliminating Tyranitar. But I think that Tyranitar's centrality is still absolutely true, as well as its inherent power with its fantastic offensive sets and its set variety. So I would agree with the number one position for it. And even people who don't like using Tyranitar are still considering Tyranitar in every step of what they do. And I think that kind of metagame impact is deserving of a number one position. Skarmory, though, is the second most impactful thing in the metagame as the premier spikes setter and physical wall of the format. It has a steel flying typing, which is great. Not only meaning it has no physical weaknesses in this metagame, as there's no physical special split yet, but Skarmory also evades spikes and sand. It's immune to spikes because it's flying. It's immune to sand because it's steel. That's outstanding, obviously. Skarmory is able to generate spikes better than anything else, chip heal better than anything else, farm leftovers healing against enemy Skarmory, enemy Claydol, whatever, various physical threats that can't hit the guy. It punishes Dugtrio really hard. It punishes a lot of things really hard. Many believe Skarmory to be the number one Pokemon for its incredible defensive power and how important it is to have a game plan against it, because if you can't really beat down or defeat Skarmory, you kind of just lose instantly. If you don't have, for example, Magneton to eliminate it, or various things that lure it in and bring it low over the course of a game, maybe Knockoff or Taunt or something. If you queue up a Gen 3 game without a plan against Skarmory, you just lose to it instantly. There's no real breathing room against it if you're not building for it, and building for it also requires like a lot. It's not as if you can just chuck Moltres on, for example, and that's it because fire beats steel. It's not that simple because Skarmory is slippery. It can't be worn down by spikes and toxic, so it just sets a layer, gets the progress, and then exits. It's not like you can just run something that hits it and that's it. You gotta run something that invites it in. Maybe a fighting type, maybe Hariyama or Magneton can directly trap the thing and pin it down. So you can also like focus punch it with Tyranitar or whatever, but actually pinning down something that is immune to spikes and sand and can chip heal so much is inherently difficult and requires often multiple Pokemon that threaten the guy or lure it in or do something to it. So for that reason, it's kind of sometimes it can feel a bit restrictive in that sense. Like you need so much to beat it. ABR brought up a good point in his viability ranking that Skarmory can be interchangeable with something like Forretress. Forretress can serve a similar purpose with its own spikes setting and great defensive value. And Skarmory will not fit on every single kind of team, of course. Not every team wants to make spikes. There's different game plans in the format. There's different ways to force progress, to chip things down over the course of a game, whether that be through Dugtrio trapping or mixed attacking or paralyzed spam, substitute spam, whatever. There's a lot of different game plans. Skarmory, you can't precisely throw it on every single team, but Skarmory spikes teams are probably the most consistent teams in the format, and many rank Skarmory above Tyranitar because they think that Skarmory is more important and more consistent and has a higher win rate than Tyranitar. And dropping Tyranitar is better than dropping Skarmory, basically. And that's a valid opinion to have. I personally would agree with this placement of Tyranitar number 1, Skarmory number 2, and these two both in the S tier above everything else is valid in my mind. Metagross is number 3. I don't think this has changed from last year. Yeah. The only difference is that Metagross, sorry, not last year, 6 months ago. Metagross was on the S rank alongside Tyranitar and Skarmory. Now it has fallen to the top of A+. Right. It's not a very big shift, I suppose, but a little bit noteworthy. Metagross is an inherently excellent Pokemon. Steel Psychic typing. Fantastic stats. The move Meteor Mash is incredibly powerful. 100 power with the attack raise chance. Has serious wall breaking prowess. It is the best explosion user in the tier, which is incredibly important. Explosion is the other really powerful concept in Gen 3. You sacrifice yourself to do 1 million damage to the enemy and deny them a turn, because if you die in Gen 3, the enemy can't take a turn. You can use that to prevent the enemy from making a spike or healing or whatever, and get a free Dugtrio trap or something as the follow-up. It's pretty cool. And Metagross is the best at doing it. Choice Band Explosion famously just one-hits Skarmory. It's that powerful. And you can use Metagross to lure in like enemy Swampert, explode on it, and just force the issue. Force something in, whether it be a bulky water type, a Skarmory, a Forretress. Something that answers Metagross can just get deleted by the very same Metagross, and that is a very powerful concept indeed. Metagross is prone to trading up, because if you get a KO with it, you then have an explosion in the back pocket to probably KO something else. And Metagross often pays for itself. It's also very good against Tyranitar, which is very good, obviously. Meteor Mash hits it for massive, super effective damage, usually one-hit KOing if you got enough attack investment, which you probably should. It can be a Tyranitar check, because it's so defensively solid that Even if Tyranitar Earthquakes you probably live +1 Earthquake and hit him back with the Meteor Mash. So Metagross can serve as a Tyranitar check and an offensive engine and an Aerodactyl answer. General soft check to a lot of stuff that can explode in a pinch. It's fantastic. Obviously, it's got clear body too. Can't be intimidated. It's got mixed sets, ability sets, and all that. I agree with Metagross number 3. Not much changed about Metagross here. Swampert is number 4. Swampert is considered the most reliable physical defense Pokemon in the format, with its water ground typing, which is amazing. It only has one weakness to grass. Only a single weakness, which you can cover with teammates, of course. Swampert has good enough bulk to take advantage of the typing, the ability to heal in the sandstorm because of the ground. Immunity to sandstorm damage is wonderful. Rock resistance is imperative against Tyranitar and Aerodactyl. It's great against Salamence. Dragonhead Salamence gets ice beamed and you can't quite break through Swampert that well. Swampert also poses a bit of an offensive threat with its stab water types. Attacks coming in on Swampert can be difficult. Ice Beam hits the Celebi coming in. Hydro Pump hits the Skarmory coming in. And you got like offensive leaning Swamperts with Focus Punch to hit Blissey really hard and Snorlax really hard. You've got Endeavor Swampert, which is a fantastic offensive set that can make a lot of progress. There's Swampert is really reliable, fits on every kind of team in my opinion. Special offense, physical offense, balance, mixed offense, hyper offense, literally every pace, literally everything. You can probably chuck a Swampert on there. It will probably do you well. It will probably just be good old reliable. And I think that that's interesting and good and wonderful for the metagame. You need a Pokemon like this. Doesn't feel annoying to fight ever in my opinion because it's got the exploitable weak point, worn down by spikes, worn down by toxic. So we love Swampert, of course. ABR ranked Swampert really low in his ranking. Let me see where other people ranked Swampert. Swampert here 6th by Darth Tyros, 12th by ABR. That's the lowest one. Mana ranked it 8th. Most people rank Swampert very high though. 3-4, 3-4. 9 from Empo as well. Interesting. I mean, this is kind of a subjective one because dropping Swampert is common on sandless teams, and ABR just really likes sandless teams recently. Those teams, I mean, first of all, you don't really need sand immunity if your game plan is to clear sand, so Swampert can feel like a waste. Swampert thrives when sand is up, of course, because it's healing and everything else isn't, so that is a factor. And ABR made a good point in his post. If you're running a rapid spinner to help Swampert from spikes, at that point you'd rather just run Suicune or Milotic because they help more against mixed attackers. That's probably true. You probably can run Swampert Claydol, but it almost feels like too much overlap. Usually, you actually run Swampert without a spinner, or maybe with an offensive Starmie or something, or perhaps a defensive Starmie. Swampert Claydol feels like too much overlap, two bulky ground types. At that point, Swampert might as well be something else for a little bit more synergy. So I understand where he's coming from there, but at the same time, the fact that Swampert just does all of that in one, it fits on so many different teams. This is a perfect position for Swampert, I think. I would wholeheartedly agree with this one. Zapdos right after Swampert. In my own previous personal rankings, I put Zapdos as high as 3rd in the game, as I personally found Zapdos to be the most consistent offensive Pokemon for me, especially on Spikes teams. Zapdos is incredibly reliable. Electric flying typing is great. It's an electric type that is not threatened by Dugtrio. That's massive. It's immune to Earthquake. It can get out of Arena Trap. It can't be trapped by Doug at all. Zapdos is immune to Spikes as well. It's also just got really good stats for the format. High speed, high bulk, great base special attack. So it's just solid all around. It's a good paralysis spreader. It's a good general threat that forces things in and usually has good options against the things it forces in. Zapdos can also be used on special offense, of course. It's not only a special threat, it's got the baton pass for pivoting, which is great to get Dugtrio in. It can even be used on physical offense teams to get Magneton in, same thing. Or like Agility Pass Zap can be great. To Agility Pass to like a Marowak and go crazy with that. I also think Zapdos fits on most kinds of teams in the game, except maybe the spikeless Stoly teams, or even the sandless spikes balanced teams can't really fit Zap, but Zap fits on a lot of things. It's solid, it's good. And you guys all know ABR ranked it really low at 20th. 20th is absurd for Zapdos. As you can see, everyone else ranked it quite high. And there's a little bit of variance in the Zapdos rankings though. I mean, a number 3 here from Mayo, number 3 here from Figgle 400 and Pixie 609, but then you got as low as 9, 8. A little bit of disagreement on how good Zapdos is. It ranges wildly from top 3 to like 8th. That's pretty interesting to see. A little bit of a tumultuous Pokemon. I tend to still think Zapdos is outstanding. That's I would rank it higher than this. I would still put it number 3 in the game, even above Metagross. Personally, I think it's a really good Pokemon. Some people think it's awkward to fit. Some people think it's not that effective as an all-in-one offensive threat, but I think it's really good and consistent at what it does personally. Up next is Blissey at the top of A. Blissey is... This might look low to you for Blissey if you've just watched the ABR video, but this is actually high for Blissey. If we take a look at last year's ranking, Blissey was all the way down here below various Pokemon, below Salamence, all the way down at 9th in the game. Here it is at top of A tier, but some people think even this is too low for Blissey. ABR ranked it number 1 in the entire game. We got a couple people ranking it 2 and 3. And this is a Pokemon with a lot of disparity. Some people think it is literally the best thing in the world. Some people think it sucks. Especially if you're an offense-leaning player, you're probably not using Blissey. You are probably rarely ever running Blissey. So this is one of the Pokemon that's always had the most disparity among top players with how good it is. I think H-Clat used to talk about how Blissey is really overrated. Avian Arctic championed Blissey as the literal best Pokemon in the entire game. So what's the deal with Blissey? Blissey is the best special wall. It is the special wall. Some say it is the only true special wall. Blissey is solid against every single special attacker. It does not have any weaknesses to any special attacks, and its base stats are so good that it can withstand just about anything. If you're running special attackers, you either need like mixed coverage to hit Blissey, or like Calm Mind to overwhelm it, or you got to just get rid of it with Dugtrio or whatever. You got to explode on it. You got to do something. Blissey is public enemy number 1 for any special attack leaning team. And in a similar way to Skarmory, Blissey is a Pokemon that you need to be able to answer in some way. You need a solid plan against it. You need to be prepared for it when you go in. And for that reason, it is a pretty high impact Pokemon in the metagame. Because if you're running like a bunch of special threats and you don't have a good plan for Blissey, Blissey will solo your entire team. It's got a team builder impact. You need to think about, if Blissey comes in, what do I do here? You can't just ignore it. So Blissey is perhaps the most high impact defensive Pokemon in the format. Swampert can actually be worn down by physical threats because it doesn't have as reliable healing. It is really solid, but if you compare Swampert to Blissey, Blissey just eats special attackers alive compared to Swampert, handling its checks. Blissey is vulnerable to sand and spikes, of course. It is not sand immune. And a lot of people think that, the permanent sand in Gen 3 is a bad thing because it makes everything suffer and not allow them to use items. I think that if Blissey did not have permanent sand to worry about, it would be a very frustrating and very overpowered Pokemon, actually. We should be thankful that sand exists so that Blissey is not literally the scariest thing of all time. Sand pressures Blissey a lot, preventing it from healing. Spikes pressure it a lot. You can taunt it, status it. There's a lot of ways to deal with it, but at the end of the day, that's asking a lot of the team building process. And similar to Skarmory, it often requires not just you chuck a Pokemon on that beats it. You need like an overarching plan against it, which is a lot to ask, of course. At the same time, why is there so much disparity? Some players rarely use Blissey on their teams because it is passive, it is slow, it does not fit at all on any kind of fast-paced team. Unlike some of these other Pokemon, Metagross, Swampert, Zapdos, that can fit on many different archetypes, are versatile. Blissey pretty much fits on slow-paced, balancey teams, and that's it. Some put Blissey higher because they think that kind of team is the best team in the game. But some disagree with that a lot and prefer offensive-leaning teams. They build in a more aggressive fashion, and Blissey is just something that never fits on their kind of playstyle. So I think that Blissey is a point of subjectivity in Gen 3, that where you rank Blissey says a lot about how you play the game, because you can either think Blissey's fantastic or terrible, depending entirely on your playstyle. I think that's a cool thing about Gen 3 is that these rankings are not necessarily objective. It truly depends on you as a player. Where you rank Blissey is based on what your philosophy is on the game itself. I think that's kind of cool. But you can't deny Blissey's metagame impact either, so it should be high. It should be top tier, because even if you're not using Blissey yourself, that's not the only thing that matters. You need to defeat Blissey and consider Blissey at every turn, and for that reason, Blissey is a top Pokemon. Up next is Gengar, above Salamence and Jirachi, which is fun. Gengar is the best Ghost type in the game, which is an important role to fill, as Ghost is an outstanding type, immune to normal and fighting, which is a big deal in Gen 3 because you're immune to Rapid Spin and Explosion, which are incredibly powerful concepts. Gengar can be used to block rapid spin preventing hazard removal from the enemy. It can also be used to pivot in on an explosion. The enemy will die while you are unaffected. One of the biggest swing turns you can get in all of this format. So that's massive. And beyond that, Gengar on its own merits is incredible. Ghost Poison typing is kind of nice. It has its drawbacks. You're weak to Psychic, but you're immune to Toxic. That's a pivot in opportunity. So you're not only immune to normal and fighting type moves, and you can bring Gengar in on those. You're immune to Poison, which is great against Skarmory, great against Milotic, great against a lot of things. And Gengar is also immune to Ground. It has Levitate, which is an incredible ability. Not only immune to Ground, immune to Dugtrio Arena Chop, but immune to Spikes is massive. So Gengar is this Swiss Army knife of immunities. It's got so many opportunities to hit the field and then get its game plan going. And Gengar is the most versatile Pokemon in this entire format. Maybe the most versatile competitive Pokemon in history, with more options than you can even name in a single breath. So much coverage: Thunderbolt, Ice Punch, Fire Punch, Giga Drain, Hidden Power Grass. Physical coverage as well. Focus Punch and Explosion come in handy. And the occasional Shadow Ball. That's niche though. It's got fantastic utility. Taunt and Will-O-Wisp. It's got Destiny Bond, Haze, Rain Dance, Curse, Perish Song, Mean Look. The EV spreads can be incredibly different, whether they be full-on offensive Gengar, defensive Gengar to live key hits and be a backup check to things, utility Gengar with a little bit of attack investment for the Hypno Focus Punch combo or big explosion ranges for the Doug follow-ups. Gengar can be customized a lot to your team's needs. It synergizes well with Dugtrio thanks to its Explode, and the way it forces in the things that Dugtrio wants to trap is fantastic. Gengar is the most beautiful Pokemon in this format, I think. It is the essence of Gen 3 itself and why I love it so much, with all of the different ways it can be used and the skill involved in using it. Let me see where people ranked Gengar. It's 8th officially, but I mean, there's a little bit of disparity, not as much as like Blissey, but Mana ranked it low at 11th. That makes sense for Mana, who uses a lot of hyper offense, where Gengar probably doesn't fit. Gengar fits with maybe mostly spikes for the spin blocking, and it's the way it pressures Blissey and it's difficult to switch in against and stuff. And Mana doesn't really use traditional Spikes teams too often. Uses more like out there offensive teams and more creative teams. So 11th for Mana makes sense. But then Siglet, number 3. Siglet tends to use more traditional Spikes teams. ABR 4. A lot of people rank it at 4th. There's also a little bit of a subjective one depending on what you use. But ABR said in his ranking he uses a lot of Spikes and Doug, and Gengar fits on those, so he rates Gengar highly for that purpose. And 4th is really high above like Swampert and stuff, so that says a lot. Gengar, it's a pretty hard Pokemon to rank in my opinion. I wonder if because Gengar has such high potential and skilled players make such good use of it, I wonder if in fact Gengar will have a trend of rising over time just because you can potentially get so much out of it. I think that could be the case. Up next is Salamence. Salamence is the other go-to fantastic offensive Pokemon in Gen 3 with its Dragon Flying typing and the ability Intimidate, which is always just so solid. Intimidate lowers their attack. Dragon Flying has a good amount of useful resistances, so Salamence has a little bit of defensive merit as well as its offensive power. You're immune to Spikes, which is always beautiful, and Salamence also has significant set variety. The most popular and consistent set being Mixed Salamence, because it has great attack and special attack. It's a perfect mixed threat. And Fire, Grass, Brick Break threatens the big popular defensive cores of Skarm, Swampert, Blissey. Also hitting Tyranitar comes in handy. And Mixed Salamence sets have a lot of mix and matching they can do. You can run Roar for phasing and forcing things out. You can run Dragon Claw just for your reliable stab, which is actually one of the better things about Mixed Salamence is the powerful Dragon Claw stab, which is good against so many switch-ins. You can run like Toxic, you can run Rock Slide, or Hydro Pump is a fun one to hit Claydol really hard and Fire types really hard. So Salamence is a fantastic, probably the best mixed attacker in the game. Dragon Dance Salamence is a great win condition, outrunning the entire format after a dance and having the coverage to just sweep with Flying Stab, Rock and Earthquake, and the occasional Brick Break. Refresh can be used on those sets too for insurance against enemies like Milotic or Starmie that use status to defeat you. And there's Wish Defensive Salamence, which is great if you need a fighter check and Wish support on certain defensive strategies. I think that you're probably thinking about ABR's ranking of Salamence all the way at the very bottom. I think that was probably considered an outlier here. Look at ABR's ranking compared to everyone else. Everyone else respects Salamence. 13 is the lowest you could go from Anonymous. Who's Anonymous? Who are you ranking Salamence 13th? Everyone else, look at all the amount of 4s and 5s. It goes down as low as 8, but that's still the significant amount of respect. That most would agree ABR is crazy for putting Salamence so low. He said that Charizard is a better mixed attacker. I think that's nonsense. Salamence is a much better mixed attacker. I think in my reaction to ABR's VR, I didn't even really talk about how good Dragon Claw is. It's such a good neutral hit that you can get so much out of, like Dragon Claw and incoming Gengar, or even Swampert, or the water types when you got Sand and Spikes up. I guess ABR just doesn't like sort of the mid-rangey Spikes and Sand builds. He wants to go either very aggressive or very defensive. Maybe the in-between is not his cup of tea. But that's probably where Salamence thrives the most. At the same time, he uses Charizard on those teams. And although Dragon Dance Salamence is answered by Swampert, it also forces in Swampert, chips it down with HP Fly, which is good. You can EV to live one Ice Beam and then overwhelm a chipped Swampert in an end game. It's a great defensive guy in the mid game, and Intimidate has so many useful applications as well. Choice Band Salamence can be scary, although that's probably the worst Salamence because it's getting sand chipped. Overall, Salamence is obviously excellent. Up next is Jirachi. I'm curious to see the spreadsheet on Jirachi. What do people think of Jirachi? It's actually pretty consistent. I mean, Anonymous here ranked it 4th. That's probably the highest. That is the highest. 4th is the highest for Jirachi. Everybody else put it like 7th to 12th. And not actually that much disparity on the Jirachi opinion. Always around here. So Jirachi is, you know, Steel Psychic, just like Metagross. It's got Serene Grace for the double secondary effect chance and 100 in all stats, making it pretty versatile. But usually it's leaning towards either defensive sets with Wish, Body Slam, and support options, or it's using offensive sets with Calm Mind and coverage moves like Stab Psychic, Ice Punch, Fire Punch, whatever. Jirachi is interesting. It can be used as a special wall and be quite good at that, especially because it is immune to sand and provides Wish support. At the same time, it's vulnerable to status and Dugtrio, more so than Blissey is, because it can't heal the status with Natural Cure, and it's weak to Earthquake. It's also vulnerable to Magneton. It usually 1v1s Magneton, but they can paralyze you, and if you're low, you're vulnerable to it. So Jirachi has that uphill battle. It has a bit of full move slot syndrome. Calm Mind sets can win on the spot in some matchups, but you really are pressed for coverage, especially if you're running Substitute, which Substitute is probably like the scariest Jirachi because it can 1v1 Blissey and just steamroll if it farms certain interactions. But then if you just don't have the right coverage, there's just one thing you can't hit and your sweep is over. So that's rough for Jirachi. This is probably about right. It's very meta relevant, very commonly seen, but it's got its little hurdles it has to overcome. It doesn't fit on absolutely everything like these top tiers do, and even the Pokemon above it here are more generally either immediately powerful or central to the format than Jirachi is. So this is probably a sensible ranking for Jirachi. Unless is Suicune at B+, I would be curious to see the previous ranking, the 6 months ago. Interesting. Previously, Celebi was above Suicune. Now, Suicune has risen a little bit. Still not better than Jirachi. Some would disagree with that. A lot would put Suicune above Jirachi, but in the aggregate ranking, Suicune ended up a bit here. Let's take a look at the spreadsheet. What a gamers think. 15th from Darth Tyros. That's surprising. Don't you like special offense? Darth Tyros. To put Suicune so low is a little bit alarming, and then Calavite puts it as high as number 5. Quite a bit of disparity with another 5 here from Mana. Mana is a very aggressive player, and Suicune is known as more of a defensive Pokemon, so that's a lot of respect from Mana. Probably preferring the offensive sets, I would imagine. Peanut Bubba putting it at 5th, insane. And a 16th from McMegan. Wow, I gotta ask McMegan about that one. A little bit of a lack of respect for Suicune from McMegan. So he goes low as 16, as high as 5, ending up at the B+ tier in the aggregate. So what's going on with Suicune? It's, you know, mono water as pressure, has the fantastic defensive stats, and it's a tale as old as time, the Crowcoon, named after the player Crowmat from Net Battle, I believe, which is Calm Mind, Rest, Sleep Talk, Surf. Back in the 2000s, that was defeating people in ladder, and to this day it still is, but there's of course more development that's been had with Suicune. Suicune was a cornerstone of an archetype called Italian Offense, where a couple Italian gamers came up with a really powerful special offense team where Suicune lead with Selakberry was used. This could take a Zapdos Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, and then live the hit, similar to the Vaporeon lead, but Suicune is more threatening than Vaporeon is. Suicune lures in Blissey as well, dies on purpose for the Doug follow-up, beat up, and then the special offense train gets moving. And if you don't have Blissey, it can sometimes win in the first slot with the Calm Mind Selak combo, just destroying everything. with a speed boost. So that's a fun development for Suicune that is semi-recent and just really good on defensive teams as a win con and a mid-game defensive piece. ABR loves it, of course, ranked it very highly. Suicune handles mixed attack as well, which is very important. Mixed attackers can tear you apart if you don't have a good response. So Suicune's great for that. Suicune also deals with like Dragon Dance Salamence. It can be a check to tar sometimes. You're vulnerable to getting Rock Slide flinched. You don't resist Rock, but you can hit them with super effective Surf. You got high defense. The Suicune helps there, and it's effective against non-Dragon Dance Tyranitars like Mixed Sets, Pursuit, or even Forretress physical Tyranitars. The Suicune has a lot going for it. It's got great defensive merit. It's a good win condition. Actually fits on quite a lot of different teams. Physical offense teams like Rest Talk Suicune because they eliminate Skarmory, and then Suicune kind of goes crazy without Skarmory's Roar to worry about. Special offense teams love it because it forces the issue, brings in Bliss. It's a good lead. You want to have an aggressive lead on those teams, and Suicune is certainly that. It fits on Stoli teams too. It's perfect there, with pressure coming up all the time, wasting people's PP. You got the Carmine win con, beating just about everything in the end game situations. So Suicune has had an interesting character arc. It used to be, people think Suicune's OP back in like the 2000s. Suicune should be banned. And then Suicune opinion dwindled a bit because, yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it can be fantastic, but it is passive. It's beaten down by Sand and Spikes. It sucks against like Zapdos Celebi. It sucks against even Moltres, HP Grass and stuff like this. It repeatedly gets forced in and worn down, and Rest is a really passive way to heal. So it's unreliable compared to like Milotic as a defensive answer to mixed attackers. And that's the downside of Suicune, is its passive nature. And, you know, offensive sets have the issue of just really sucking versus Blissey. They use that to their advantage in some teams by luring in Blissey. But if you got Carmine 3 attacks, no rest, you just lose to Blissey. So that's rough. But, you know, Suicune teams tend to be really consistent. And when it has the appropriate support, it can thrive. Maybe it deserves to be a bit higher than this. My hunch is telling me that Suicune should be where Jirachi is. That's where I feel right now in this moment. I feel like Suicune could probably be where Jirachi is. You switch them. But this is not too bad of a ranking, and it seems like this could be the result of a bit of disagreement, where some rank it high, some rank it low. Celebi's next. I think Celebi's very good. It's a grass psychic type. Natural Cure, always nice. 100 stats across the board, can be used in variety of different ways. It has Leech Seed, which is one of the safest things you can click in this format because it just makes guaranteed chip damage and healing, which is always lovely. Really punishes Blissey and Snorlax, which is fantastic. So Celebi can really help you in those matchups. It has offensive capabilities. There's a Leech Seed 3 attack set is one of the coolest spike abuses because Blissey can't come in. It gets punished by Leech Seed, and then nothing loves switching in beyond that. So that's really powerful. Carmine Baton Pass is the most classic Celebi. You can Carmine Pass to whatever special threat you want. Great on the Dugtrio beat up teams. But that can be telegraphed though, so you got to be careful with how you use that. Swords Dance Pass Celebi, great on physical offense. You can bring in like a sub-Leechy, very Aerodactyl, or a Salamence with a Swords Dance boost and go crazy with it. Very, very effective. I think Celebi is pretty fantastic. It's a bit difficult to lean on it as a special or generally as a defensive Pokemon sometimes because Celebi can suffer from its bug weakness, because Dugtrio runs HP bug to hit it super effectively. So Celebi's forced into running HP on most of its sets to live that from full, and then that can be a little bit restrictive for it. If it wants to be more offensive, it sort of can't, otherwise it dies to Dug too easily. It's bad versus the fire types. Moltres and Charizard hit it with a one hit KO usually. There's a lot of ice coverage running around. If you're running Celebi as a special wall, you got to worry about Gengar Ice Punch, Starmie Ice Beam, Suicune Ice Beam, and the fire types obviously. Not the best special wall for typing purposes. Jirachi has similar problems, but at least Jirachi is sand immune. Celebi is not sand immune, making it easy to wear down as a defensive piece and bring it into that ever valuable Dugtrio range. So Celebi's under fire from every direction. Even Blissey Ice Beam will pressure it. So Celebi's got a lot of uphill battle, but Celebi at the same time is one of the best things against enemy water types like Suicune and Swampert especially. Patching up the Swampert matchup is Celebi's greatest strength, and that's probably the number one reason I use it. If you're a little bit Swampert weak, Celebi will heal you right up. It's pretty nice versus Gengar. His Ice Punch isn't that strong, and you threaten them with Psychic. I think it's quite effective versus Gengar. This is probably another one with a lot of disparity, isn't it? The player Fredazi, who burst onto the scene a couple of years ago now, famously put Celebi really high and got a lot out of it. Celebi tends to peak around 8th is the highest ranking for Celebi, actually. No one put it beyond 8th, and then it went as low as 17th from Anonymous 15th from Lou is pretty low too. The generally lower end of these rankings, Celebi sentiment maybe dipping a bit. Where was it ranked before? It was higher. Celebi was above Suicune before in the A rank, so I think Celebi dipping a little bit in people's public opinion. I think Claydol being at B is a significant drop, is it not? Where was Claydol last time? It was also in B, actually. Wait a minute, Claydol went up. Did Claydol go up in its viability? It's ranked 12th here, and on this list it's ranked 13th. About the same, actually. About the same. I thought people loved Claydol, but maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I should have consulted the documents, because Claydol sentiment is pretty low here. It's interesting. Claydol is probably most considered the best rapid spinner in the game. It is a ground psychic type, so it's got that ever valuable rock resistance with great defensive value there. As Levitate, so it's immune to spikes and earthquake, and Dugtrio, always amazing. And it's crucially got rapid spin and explosion, so it can get rid of hazards, come in on the spikes it's trying to get rid of and be immune to them, which is what makes it particularly great. It's also immune to the sand, so it's a little bit tricky to actually pin this guy down sometimes as a defensive Pokemon, and a lot of opportunities to rapid spin. It's got stab psychic, which helps versus Gengar, who's trying to spin block, so that's amazing. And explosion is the real kicker, because explosion lets you trade with things, soft check things. Claydol is bulky enough to live from full hits from most sweepers, and then it can explode on them as a check in a pinch. It can get rid of like a Snorlax maybe, or a Blissey, or Swampert or something coming in. The explosion makes it so much scarier after it's done its job and been chipped down. It's still not done. It can get something on the way out, and that's always really scary. I feel like, should Claydol not be higher than this? Claydol is incredibly easy to fit on teams. Rapid spinning is so good, and this is the rapid spinner, and it's just so good defensively as well. I feel like Claydol has been slighted here a little bit. Claydol, of course, cannot be relied as a sole defensive check to like Tyranitar Aerodactyl, because it's going to be worn down, but it helps against them quite a bit. It helps against them enough to warrant being at least half a check to them, half of an answer. Stab Earthquake comes in handy. There's also like Refresh and Rest on the Stolia teams, which are great. I feel like Claydol has been disrespected significantly here. Where are people ranking Claydol? Highest is 7th. People are, the Claydol disrespect is running rampant. It's all double digits all the way down. I feel like Claydol is self-sufficient, easy to chuck on a team, does one of the most important things in the game, and just always gets value. So I feel like I'm going a bit crazy with this one. I disagree with everybody here. Claydol should be higher. Claydol should be way higher. Doug is pretty low too. I think, just initial thoughts are that Doug should be higher. Doug they were also next to each other last time, so that's interesting. Doug is the Arena Trapper. It's got Arena Trap to trap enemy Pokemon. It only traps grounded Pokemon though, so flying types and levitating Pokemon cannot be trapped, but everything else can be. And you chuck a choice band on it, do as much damage as possible, and trap as many things as you can. And that's an inherently very good concept. Teams are built around Dugtrio, trapping specific enemies to enable them. And Dugtrio also provides a lot of consistency to teams, as it can eliminate various off-meta Pokemon. It can eliminate fighting types like Breloom and Heracross. It can eliminate Raikou. Random, like, Camerupts. It can, even things that's not aiming to trap, like Starmie, can be brought low enough to get eliminated. Swampert or Suicune, if they're chipped down to, like, lower than what they wanted, you can eliminate them. Dugtrio can be used in many different ways for many different applications. It, of course, comes with a cost, because if you lock into something with Dugtrio, you're going to get punished by a lot. Whether it be a Skarm coming in making a free layer or a free Toxic. Zap coming in with the sub pass, you lose so much momentum off that because you're just locked into Earthquake helpless. Salamence can come in and Dragon Dance, so sometimes trapping someone with the Dugtrio just loses you the game. And locking into like Aerial Ace or HP Bug can also be punished by enemy Dug. They can come in and just get you because you don't KO them with the lock-in, but they KO you. Locking into Beat Up is the same deal. Porygon 2 can punish those. The occasional Gardevoir can punish that. So Dug comes at a cost, but at the same time, Dug is like the best trapper. Well, there's not many trappers, but it's definitely the best one. And such a fantastic enabler for so many different things. Not only with the speedy Dug that you see on balance teams to eliminate, whatever you want, primarily it's Tar and Metagross are your targets and Jirachi, but you can also just use it for so many different things like Celebi. But Dugtrio can also be used on special offense teams to eliminate Blissey with the special defense spread, which enables that whole archetype, and that's it's been pretty popular recently. A lot of players are running that. I guess Doug can be a hard thing to evaluate on these tier lists because what are you ranking based on? Metagame impact, consistency, or like how good is it on its own merits? Because Doug inherently is a team player. It enables teammates. On its own, it's not super powerful, but it can create some of the most incredible teams in the game because it is a fantastic team enabler. I don't know. I think it should be higher than this. I think it probably should be higher than Jirachi, Suicune, and Celebi, at least. And you could argue it higher than some of these other ones up the top too. I mean, ABR put it as high as second place. Sorry, I think this is an outdated one. I think he put it second. And Skarmory third. He switched them. So this is a slightly outdated ranking here. But my gosh, Siglet put it at 26th. Siglet, that's damn low. Calavite at 14th. A lot of low rankings for Doug. ABR putting it at the tip top. ABR is alone on this one. The highest, McMegan put it 7th. That's a lot of respect. And probably the two best players here putting Doug high. That tells you something maybe. But boy oh boy, I don't know if I agree with this one. I can't believe how low people are ranking Claydol and Dugtrio recently. Am I out of the loop? Do people not like these Pokemon anymore? I don't know. Aero has fallen off. Look at this. Aero back here was above Claydol and Doug. Now it's below them. That's pretty significant. Aero is... No, it's kind of like Choice Scarfer before that even existed, because it has the incredibly high speed of max 394, which can actually outrun so many things. It can outrun Dugtrio, it can outrun Starmie, just about everything. Even +1 Dragonlance Tyranitar gets outrun by Aerodactyl. +1 Select boosted Swampert and Select boosted Metagross get outrun by just a base speed Aerodactyl, so it sometimes feels like speed control in a similar way to what Choice Scarfer does, where you can outrun those speed boosted threats. And it's rock flying type, so immune to sanded spikes, always beautiful, so you can just chuck a choice band on it, not worry about getting chipped. It's got the stab rock slide, which is just fantastic at making progress, doing big damage, and forcing in rock resistances, which are inherently easy to wear down because they don't have healing moves. So like Swampert can get beat down by Aero over time as it's repeatedly forced in, and Aerodactyl almost feels like it's got heavy duty boots on for you modern gen gamers because it can just come in and not get chipped by the hazards, which is really useful. Aero, it has been considered one of the most consistent offensive threats in the game's history. So this is pretty low for Aero, but I can almost see where people are coming from here with this Aero ranking. Aero sometimes feels like it can thud and maybe rely a little bit on the rock slide flinches to actually get through like a Milotic or a Suicune or whatever. Often comes up that you have to hit one flinch, which is not something you want to rely on for progress. Like the enemy has to respect your flinch chance and run things that don't get flinched, but they end up in a scenario where you got to hit the flinch. It happens often, and you don't want to be in that scenario. And often you are relying on predicts because your choice band, you're locking in. You got to like Earthquake the Jirachi coming in once, or Double Edge the Swampert once, or, get some other crazy play to break through with Aero, which can sometimes feel like you're gambling on this going right for you, which is not always the best way to go when you compare it to like a Dragon Dance Sweeper who does not have to predict every single time they come in. They could just click the move that hits what's in front of them, can't they? So that being said, Aerodactyl is so fast and applies such immediate pressure that it can recover momentum very well. It can force things in very well, and that's what makes it so good. I still think it's, of course, you need a check to it, or it'll just if you're weak to Aero, it's one of the things that punishes you the most. But at the same time, it does have those consistency issues. Let's take a look at the spreadsheet. Yeah, Aero sentiment is very low, mostly double digits, with the highest ranking being 9th from Crystal. I feel like Aero used to be much more well-liked than this. That's pretty crazy. Snorlax is right up next, and Snorlax seems to be rising. Back in the last 6 months, Snorlax was below many Pokemon, including Aerodactyl. Now Snorlax is above many Pokemon. Snorlax, the premier bulky attacker, perhaps, of the format, with incredible... It's got the normal typing, good defensive stats, high attack, and of course Curse, which boosts attack and defense, lowers speed. A Curse Lax is just one of the most frightening things that can snowball out of control and defeat your entire team, as you can't kill it and it's killing you. Snorlax also has Self-Destruct, which is stab boosted and works pretty much the same as Explosion, KOing you and defeating them. That's one of the hardest hitting self-KO options in the format, folks. which is always good. Snorlax, however, suffers from its vulnerability to sand and spikes in a similar way to Suicune, because Snorlax relies on rest for its healing. It can't recover like Milotic or protect like Swampert or Wish like Jirachi, so it's getting forced in. It can't chip heal with leftovers from if sand is up, and if you're using it as a special wall or as a defensive piece, it's gonna probably get worn down and KO'd over time. Even like coming in on a Starmie Hydro Pump, a weak hit like that, you're taking spikes and sand, which wears you down, and the little chip damage. It's just weak to chip damage, really. And like raw. And also what sucks about it is that once it does come in, it is very easily answered by Skarmory, who just comes in, destroys it, doesn't take nothing from anything it can do really, except Focus Punch, and then just roars it out if it's trying to curse up, and then that's it. The worst that can happen is a Body Slam Paralysis, but even then you can still do the job of walling the thing. So Curse Lax has that issue. There is, of course, different Lax sets like 4 attacks Snorlax with Focus Punch with the aim to lure in Skarmory, but that doesn't hit Skarm that hard, and it suffers from the same problems of no healing and getting worn down. That being said, Snorlax is fantastic alongside Magneton, and it's perhaps the best Pokemon alongside Magneton, because you eliminate Skarmory and Snorlax suddenly becomes just 100 times scarier, with Body Slam spam, just dealing damage and paralyzing everything. And you got great physical coverage, Earthquake and Shadow Ball, you got Self-Destruction, and a Curse set with Skarmory down can win the game very easily. A good combo is Curse Snorlax with a Pursuit user such as Tyranitar or Houndoom or Umbreon, and with Skarmory and Gengar gone, you just run normal type attack and Earthquake, and that is just fantastic coverage to hit pretty much everything in the world and defeat all of them. So Snorlax is punished by a lot of the central mechanics of the format, but at the same time it can be a monster in the right circumstances. And some people think it sucks, some people think it's outstanding and bring it all the time. As we can see from these, Empo didn't rank Snorlax, or it's not here, but 9th from ABR, that's a significant amount of respect from ABR, actually. That's really high. 7th from Mana, who probably relies on Snorlax to enable offense a lot with like Curse Explosion sets, which can defeat Skarmory, and it's a good Pokemon on offensive teams as well, because it is so bulky and it applies so much pressure. So it is actually able to come in defensively and then start applying pressure. So I think Mana is a big fan of Magneton as well. So that adds up. A bit of an increase for Snorlax, but still, it's probably from those couple of uncharacteristically high ratings from those two players probably affected something there. Not uncharacteristic for them, uncharacteristic, I suppose, for the general community. Up next is Starmie in the B tier. Starmie before was ranked above Snorlax. Now Snorlax is outranked Starmie. Interesting. Starmie is quite speedy. Water Psychic typing, Natural Cure, that's good. It can hit 361 speed, which outruns max speed Gengar, and common threats like Salamence, Zapdos, Charizard, Moltres. Most of the metagame except like Aerodactyl, Jolt do outrun Starmie. So Starmie has one of the best speed tiers, outrunning a lot of significant things. It's got great coverage. Stab Hydro Pump is great, hitting Tyranitar, Claydol, and various things of fire types. And then you got Ice Beam, Thunderbolt. A lot of Pokemon rely on like Thunder Punch and Ice Punch for that coverage, which is a little bit weak, but you got the hard hitting Thunderbolt and Ice Beam on Starmie, which is always wonderful. And Starmie can tear apart teams unprepared. If you're not running Blissey, if you happen to not be running Blissey, Starmie is perhaps the biggest punish, because there's such good coverage, it's faster than everything, and can be really difficult to switch in against. So Starmie punishes those kinds of teams a lot. And Starmie is also a rapid spinner, can remove hazards. And it's pretty good at doing that, because it has Stab Psychic, which you can sometimes run Gengar. Usually it's hard to fit that, because you want Hydro, Ice Beam, T-Bolt, Spin on the offensive set. The Psychic is good for that, but bad everywhere else. But you can also run defensive Starmie sets with Recover and options like Thunder Wave or Toxic, and Rapid Spin there, and just Surf as a stab option to hit Tyranitar and whatnot. And that can be an even more reliable way to rapid spin with Starmie, and Natural Cure comes up all the time there, as you can soak status. Starmie can be a little bit awkward to use because it can get worn down by the spikes it's trying to get rid of, which that's the better thing about Claydol, is that it's immune to the spikes. So you want to bring in Starmie when spikes are up, but then it's taking damage from them and getting worn down. Starmie can also suffer, ironically, against Skarmory, who you'd think will be a good matchup, but Skarmory can actually Toxic you, and even though you have Natural Cure, you're gonna get worn down permanently if you don't have Recover, and they can reestablish a spike. You can get a Hydro Pump or Thunderbolt in there, but they'll tank one and just protect spam a lot. So you get worn down, and then Starmie can struggle to make progress and struggle to do its job of rapid spinning sometimes. Especially because it can get spin blocked by Gengar. You are threatening to Gengar, but Gengar is elusive. You can switch to bring in Blissey once, and Starmie without recover, prone to getting worn down easily. Starmie with recover can also be a bit awkward. It's actually sometimes a bit more vulnerable with Gengar, because Gengar comes in on the spin and then they actually threaten you with Thunderbolt. You don't want to take that, so that can be a little bit rough. Starmie can sometimes be awkward to use, but fundamentally very good. Probably, it always ends up around here. It's a bit lower this time actually though. I think ABR ranked it pretty high. ABR ranked it 7th, which is the highest here. So ABR respects Starmie, but wow, a lot of Starmie sentiment is plummeting. My gosh, 22nd from Jonald. Jonald, you didn't have to kill him like that. River with 12th. That's one of the higher ones. I think that's about like probably about where I would rank Starmie, like 12th to 16th or something. But here it is with some seriously low ranking, multiple 22s. Calavite also put it low. I much prefer defensive. I think defensive Starmie is really good, and I don't like offensive Starmie that much. But defensive Starmie can also be awkward, and sometimes Claydol just does the job better. Up next, Charizard has outranked Moltres. This is a big one, to be honest. For many years, Moltres has been the premier fire type. In this, Charizard is officially better than Moltres in many people's eyes. Let me see the spreadsheet. It's a pretty low ratings, but some of these gamers putting Charizard as high as 11th. That's pretty incredible. So actually an interesting disparity here. But you compare this to the Moltres rankings, and Mana put Moltres at 30th. Wow, what the hell's... What did Moltres do to you? What did Moltres do to you? Okay, that's crazy. Anyway, yeah, Charizard this is Charizard's best OU generation, barring Mega and Gigantamax and fake things that don't exist. Normal Charizard is at its best in Gen 3 OU, where it is a pretty great mixed attacker. It's got the fire flying typing, which in this gen is good. There's no rocks. You're immune to Will-O-Wisp. You resist stuff like, well, enemy fire moves and steel, crucially, which is good against Metagross. And most crucially of all, you are immune to spikes, which is outstanding. And you're immune to Earthquake, which of course threatens fire. So you're immune to that, and you can't get trapped. So fire flying, obviously the best type combo to have on a fire type in this format. And Charizard has the advantage of over Moltres of having some mixed options. It's got hard-hitting Fire Blast or Overheat or Flamethrower. HP Grass usually is the coverage of choice to hit Swampert and other water types. And then you got Focus Punch, which can destroy Blissey and Tyranitar, which can be common switch-ins. And other rock types, Snorlax. So Sub-Punch Fire Grass Charizard can just tear apart standard teams on its own. It hits Skarmory, Swampert, Tyranitar, Blissey, Snorlax. It does great work against them. Charizard can also run Beat Up, which deals typeless damage based on base stats for each healthy, alive party member. So that deals massive damage to Blissey because they have no base defense. Charizard's good there. So because of that, Charizard is a little bit more self-sufficient than Moltres because Charizard threatens more things than Moltres does, while Moltres is walled by Blissey a little bit more. But at the same time, Charizard suffers from pretty low stats. It gets, even though it can come in on the Metagross Meteor Mash, it takes like 40 sometimes, and it's getting really worn down by that. Substitute, if you're running that, lowers your HP, so you're taking a lot. So you really have to get a lot out of Charizard early game and go crazy with it in one big Charizard moment. And it's not sticking around for long, probably, because it's frail. Its entry points are there, but it's getting chipped even by resisted hits significantly. And it sucks against water types, is one of the big problems, because Suicune destroys it. You take a little from HP Grass, Milotic destroys it. It can even be a little bit rough versus like bulky Zapdos, who resists Focus Punch, is taking little from the Fire Blast if they've got Spadef investment and just super effectively hits you. So you suck against those. I like Charizard with Toxic for that reason, because it actually punishes those particular switch-ins, except Milotic, who has Refresh, but you punish a lot of others. But if you run support for that matchup, then Charizard can be really good. I actually still think Moltres is better, because it's bulkier, it can take more hits. It does require Spike support, but Spike support is just good. So, you know, and the Moltres, we'll talk about Moltres now, I suppose. Moltres has the same fire flying typing. It's got way better stats, way higher special attack, and a modest HP Grass for Moltres actually does do good damage to those water types that ruin Charizard's life. As long as Spikes and Sand are up, which they probably are. So Moltres is good in that sense. Moltres also has a really massive overheat with just really high damage, and that can actually sometimes get rid of a Blissey if they've been chipped enough. The flamethrower into overheat with Modest does a pretty good amount of damage. So if you've brought Blissey low over the course of a game and you got a good amount of spikes up and Sanders up, that can be a good game plan. And you can one hit like a Gengar, you can one hit a lot of stuff with overheat, or just do really good chip damage on like an incoming Snorlax. You also have Will-O-Wisp, which is an amazing move, just applying burn. So the Suicune coming in at least takes a Will-O-Wisp. Same with the Milotic. It has to spend a turn refreshing. Zapdos coming in. Because of overheat, you threaten Spidef Zapdos a lot more and can also eliminate them sometimes with that. And Moltres can run Roar to pressure Blissey and other switch-ins and just force them out. That requires a Predict, but I think it's good. You can also run like Protect Moltres and rack up damage with either Will-O-Wisp or Toxic. Toxic can be good on Moltres too. So I personally think Moltres is better, but Charizard's faster. It's more immediately threatening and widely threatening, but it gets destroyed by the waters, man. It gets really owned. Anyway, in between these two flaming birds is Magneton, who is the Magnet Pull Trapper, who is the anti-Skarmory thing. Magneton has Magnet Pull, which traps steel types, and you hit him with the big stab boosted Thunderbolt to eliminate them, and that enables physical threats like Dragonite, Salamence, Gyarados, Snorlax, whatever. It also can enable other stuff like Rapid Spin Balance teams with Skarmory of your own that appreciate their spikes engine being eliminated, so you can just spin permanently and no more spikes. That's really good. It's Claydol teams. Magneton can even be gone on special attacking teams because Skarm actually is the most common Roar user. So if you run Magneton, get rid of their Skarm, you can overwhelm the enemy with Calm Mind users even if they have Blissey, because you just spam them and some Calm Mind users come over you on Blissey. It's what Roar is what you're really worried about there, so Mag can eliminate the big Roar user. I think Mag, it's a little bit hard to evaluate because it just has one job of getting rid of Skarm and, like, you know, the occasional Forretress, other niche uses here and there like Toxicking something, but occasionally one hitting like a Suicune sometimes. But usually it just has one job, and then it's a pretty average Pokemon besides that. I don't know though, it also enables a lot of teams, and Skarm is so central that running Mag always feels worthwhile. It never feels like dead weight to do so in my eyes. And let me see the rankings here. I'm curious. Siglet ranked it really high, Emperor ranked it 10th, and a lot of people ranked it super low, like down in the 20s, even 27 from Judge. So yeah, a bit of disagreement on Mag. A lot of players probably just don't use it that much and prefer other ways to deal with Skarm. It can be unreliable, as Skarm can kind of play around it, and Skarm could just make a layer and accept one layer and then die. It's not even that bad for them, because one layer is really good. Mag, I would put it higher than this because it enables team archetypes. It's a reliable way to get rid of Skarm. It's a mostly reliable way to get rid of Skarm. But I suppose I can understand disparity. I think that you might look at this and think Mag is worse than this, but pretty much every player will use Mag teams. Mag teams are central and important, so I think it deserves a bit more respect than this. Up next is Forretress. Where was Forretress last year? I'm curious. Forretress was around here. I think Forretress moved up a bit. Forretress is much higher than a lot of Pokemon. Forretress is the second best spiker in Gen 3 besides Skarmory. It is a bug steel type, amazing defensive typing with only one weakness to fire. Only one weakness and many useful traits and resistances. It has access to spikes, rapid spin, and explosion, which is a golden combination. That's the 3 best moves in the damn tier. So you can actually be pretty effective against enemy Skarmory, especially if they're running Toxic and not Drill Peck, because they can't do anything to you. Meanwhile, you can rapid spin their spikes away and make spikes of your own, and just that will, over the course of the game, destroy them. The Forretress is a great anti-Skarmory Pokemon, and the fact that it has Explosion gives it such flexibility. In offensive matchups, Forretress is not going to stick around for long and do that game plan of spamming spikes and, 1v1ing Skarmory long term, but if you got Explosion, you could just trade with a threat, get a bit of momentum back. Maybe you just get one layer and explode. That's enough, man. Forretress, just having access to Explosion means you can function at a higher, faster pace as well as a slower pace. Or, even in slower paced matchups, you can explode against a key enemy like, a Swampert or something, and make way for your threat to win. So Explosion is so good. It also has interesting other options. It's got Earthquake, which is good to hit Magneton, who's trying to trap you with HP Fire. You just Earthquake them. HP Bug is really good. It's stab boosted. It hits both Claydol and Starmie. So rapid spinning against Forretress can be really awkward because they are taking a lot from HP Bug as they click rapid spin, so they can't do that forever. That's really good. HP Ghost is good. It hits the spinners a little bit weaker, but it hits Gengar, who's trying to spin block, and that's really nice. Zap Cannon is a funny one. It's a 50% accurate move that paralyzes. It's electric move, so you can paralyze Skarm or Gengar coming in, or other things, and that's pretty useful. Forretress is rough. It's competing with Skarmory, who tends to be better because it's mostly because of the flying typing makes you so much nicer versus so many things. Like you dodge spikes, you're immune to Earthquake. Forretress can be bad against like Metagross. You wouldn't think so, but it's taken a lot from the neutral Earthquake, especially if they get an attack raise. So that can be a little bit tough. Forretress is not nearly as sturdy as Skarmory is, and doesn't wall as many things and gets worn down easier. Can't heal as much, but it has its own unique advantages, and it is a very valid Pokemon that's commonly seen in competitive play. Great players get good use out of it because the flexibility of how to use it from game to game is really interesting, I think. I think Forretress is really cool in subtle ways that it seems like just a simple spike setter, but it's actually quite nuanced in how you use it. And I think Forretress teams are great, personally. I might put it higher than this, actually. I think Forretress is great, but yeah. It needs support from usually a Pursuit user because it sucks a little bit against Gengar. You can run those options to hit Gengar, but that's prediction reliant as well. So you need a Pursuit user. That's like a requirement for it. So it's not like self-sufficient. It needs support. And often you need Wish support to heal it back up. You need, I don't know. It can be rough in that sense, but I think it's very good anyway. Flygon is next. Flygon is another rock resist that can check Tyranitar and Aerodactyl, but the difference is that Flygon, unlike Swampert, is a Dragon Ground type with Levitate. Levitate's its best trait because it's immune to ground, immune to spikes. A spike immune rock resist is really, really good, and Flygon can be used on Superman teams which ignore spikes as much as possible with as many levitators and flying types as possible. Flygon can also be good in other balanced teams. If you want your rock resist task switching to not get worn down as much, maybe you can't afford a spinner, but you don't want Swampert because you're too weak to spikes, Flygon fits in there. And you have support against the mixed threats and the Salamence from like a Milotic or something, or a Suicune. So Flygon will fit there. At the same time, Flygon, not as good as Swampert at doing all that, and it's bad against Metagross, unlike Swampert, bad against Salamence. And Flygon is very, very punished by Skarm and Gengar. Meanwhile, Swampert can hit them with a massive Hydro Pump. Flygon can't really do anything to them. You can like Rock Slide Gengar for 17% or something. It's peanuts. It's not very good. And Skarmory just destroys your entire life. Sometimes Flygon runs Fire Blast, but you don't have much special attack. You're not doing much with that. Skarm can shrug it off and just Toxic you, and then you're dying. You're suffering. So that's the issue with Flygon, but definitely a good alternative to Swampert on certain teams that is a valid member of the metagame. Probably around this mid-tier is valid for Flygon. Milotic next, Water type. Just a simple Pokemon. It's a Water type bulky recover guy. It's got, usually it runs Recover, Toxic, Refresh, and Surf. It's got really good stats. It's really effective against mixed threats, and all it does is just wall things and status things. If you need an answer to mixed threats, this is your guy. If you're running a slower paced team, this is your guy. But it doesn't fit on many teams. It can be very passive. It can be very vulnerable to secondary effects because it often is in recover loops where it has to keep clicking recover, and eventually something's going to flinch you or paralyze you or freeze you or spit extra drop, whatever it may be. So that is or crit you even. Milotic is called the Hax Magnet because over a lot of turns, if you're spamming recover, something's going to happen to you. So that's a disadvantage of Milotic. So passive that it can actually be a detriment. So that's pretty much Milotic. Around here is valid. Heracross, still higher than Medicham on the official rankings. ABR put Medicham higher. They're kind of competing. They're similar fighting type wall breakers, so you can almost talk about them in tandem. Let's take a look at the Heracross rankings. I'm curious. Most of these rankings are in the 20s. So highest ranking for Heracross in the game was 17th from Judge. Heracross sentiment seems to be pretty low, but Heracross is good. It's a bug fighting type. It's got Stab Mega Horn, which is one of the most powerful wall breaking moves in the game, hitting so many things for big neutral damage, hitting Claydol super effectively, Starmie, hitting like Swampert for massive damage, Snorlax, whatever. Problem is it's inaccurate though. 85 accuracy is pretty rough sometimes, and Mega Horn misses can cost you the game, but still valid and important to consider, of course. Heracross suffers from its poor matchup into Salamence, because Salamence comes in, intimidates you, and resists both Mega Horn and fighting type attacks. And that's pretty tough. So Heracross to function needs support, usually from Magneton, to get rid of Skarmory. Some sort of check to Salamence, sometimes that's Porygon 2, because it helps versus Doug and Salamence. Speaking of Doug, Heracross gets trapped by Dugtrio, Aerial Ace, which is ×4 super effective against it, one hitting it. I think that the best Heracross set is probably Salac on weather clear teams, because if you clear weather, sand is no longer chipping you, and you can substitute down to a Salac berry and get a speed boost. You now outrun everything, and you have Swarm boosted Mega Horn, which can sweep entire games. So Heracross with a Salac boost is one of the, perhaps it's the scariest threat in the entire game. it's entirely possible because you can be losing the whole game and then Heracross comes in with the Select Berry and just insta wins. It's one of those. So you got to be very careful of how you pilot against that and be very careful not to let them steamroll. That means even that is unreliable though because the Mega Horn missed chance. So people aren't so hot on Heracross right now. I suppose it's inconsistent, doesn't fit on that many teams and requires support. And even when it has that support, it relies on Mega Horn, which is inconsistent. But it has a great wall breaking potential and you can get a lot out of it in the right circumstances. Up next is Jolteon, who is kind of an old-fashioned Pokemon. In the old metagame, it was considered great. Now it's not so much, and I wonder if it's gone up or down. It appears to be around the same position as it was before, so that's, you know, sensible. Jolteon is a mono-electric type. It has the same speed stat as Aerodactyl, hitting 394. They're tied for the fastest relevant OU Pokemon in the format, and that's very valuable. That's the biggest thing Jolteon has going for it, is outrunning everything. And you can also use Jolteon for its Volt Absorb ability, which is great, as it grants electric immunity and healing upon getting hit by an electric move. So it can be a Zapdos switch in, Gengar switch in, Starmie switch in, if they're clicking electric moves, which they often are. Problem though is that Volt Absorb doesn't help you versus Thunder Wave in this gen. You can still get Thunder Waved. That's rough. Especially because Zapdos runs Thunder Wave. That's a common thing that happens. Jolteon comes in on Zap thinking it's lovely, and then it gets paralyzed, and then you're destroyed. All your speed is down the toilet. But Jolteon can be great as a Spikes threat because it's forcing so many things out, and it has the great Bolt Beam coverage. It's got Baton Pass 2 for pivoting purposes and Roar. Jolteon suffers though in this metagame because it's getting worn down by Spikes, unlike Aerodactyl, who's not. And it also sucks against Claydol. Claydol comes in, it can't take any damage from Spikes because of Levitate. It can shrug off both HP Ice and Grass because it has high base special defense and it threatens you with super effective Earthquake. So it's also immune to Thunderbolt. So Claydol just destroys Jolteon significantly. I think Jolteon's alright, but it is definitely rough to use it, and it doesn't fit on that many teams these days. Medicham is next. Medicham, I've gone on record saying this is my favorite Pokemon in Gen 3 OU. I love using it. I love watching it be used. I think it's so cool. It's a psychic fighting type with pure power. It can achieve some of the highest damage output in the game with pure power, which doubles attack. It's not that fast. It's not that bulky, but it hits like a truck. And I think I might personally put it above Heracross, actually. You know, that's been a popular opinion recently among certain people, and I think I agree. Medicham does not rely on a unreliable wall-breaking option. It has all accurate moves, except like Rock Slide, but that's pretty accurate. And I think it's pretty good at wall-breaking. It also doesn't quite get one hit by Doug. Usually you're chipped and you die anyway to Earthquake, but you're not ×4 weak to flying like Heracross and Breloom are. So Medicham with access to Shadow Ball as well, which hits Gengar. It's got the big hard-hitting Focus Punch. I think it also hits Salamence a bit harder with Rock Slide, so that's relevant. And I kind of enjoy White Herb Medicham because you can get rid of the attack drop from a single Intimidate once. You can be a bit more tricky with Medicham than you can with Heracross because you can run like Lumberry sets to bluff Choice Band, get the Gengar. Choice Band itself is very good to do unexpected big damage. Heracross is a bit more easy to predict what it is, based on the team structure. Can't surprise you as much. Medicham can surprise you a bit more. Can run the Select Berry as well, or the Lychee Berry for unexpected high damage. I think Medicham is a bit more effective at doing what Heracross wants to do, so I rate it quite high. Heracross does have Guts and Swarm, which are good, but Medicham, I think, just does big damage early. And a lot of great players get a lot out of Medicham. I'm curious to see the ranking of Medicham. It's mostly in the 20s, but some people put it pretty high, 17th here. Is this right? ABR put it 30th? Is that correct? I guess so. I suppose so. He didn't use it that often, so that sort of makes sense. Yeah. But interestingly, Medicham is a UUBL Pokemon, and it is ranked above some OU Pokemon right now on this official list. At the current moment, Medicham is a better Pokemon in the eyes of most than Cloyster, who's ranked in OU, Gyarados, and Breloom, who are all ranked in OU. Does this mean Medicham could rise to OU? It's possible. It is entirely possible. It has been a consistent tournament performer for years now. It's been a popular choice, and it's probably seen more often than some of these ones we're about to talk about, to be honest. So we could see that. Up next is Cloyster. Cloyster is an alternative spiker to Forretress and Skarmory. It's a water-ice type. It's got massive base defense, spikes, spin, explosion as well, just like Forretress does. Although it is not sand immune, the defensive typing is not as good as Forretress's. It does have higher speed. It's got access to Stab Surf and Stab Ice Beam, which is really nice. And being faster with explosion is very relevant, as Cloyster can be a little bit more aggressive of a spiker than Forretress and Skarmory can. Hitting things harder, especially Tyranitar. It's especially good against enemy water types too, because it resists water and it's got high defense against Swampert, who can't hit you that hard. So Cloyster's interesting. It's been a bit inconsistent recently, I think, but there's perhaps development to be had with Cloyster. Maybe the old ways people use Cloyster are falling out of fashion with like Jolteon and the 244 speed benchmark. ABR mentioned he's running faster on Cloyster for the boom follow-up with Doug. Cloyster Doug with explosion synergy could be the way to go in the future to enable chain reactions that can create a win condition. I think that could be smart. So we'll see how the Cloyster meta develops in the future. Maybe Cloyster will rise back up to relevance. Gyarados is next. Gyarados is very similar to Dragon Dance Salamence. It's usually just a Dragon Dance Pokemon. Has hidden power flying for stab, earthquake as a coverage, and water flying typing is the reason to use this over Salamence, because it's not times 4 weak to ice. It's neutral to ice. And that's a big deal, because Gyarados can actually set up against Swampert and Milotic and Suicune instead of being just beaten by them and KO'd by them. That's pretty significant. The things that check Gyarados are actually a little bit more limited. Zapdos can come in and threaten you, but Zapdos doesn't love getting Thunder Waved or Double Edged, and it can be chipped down as well. Gengar, same deal, doesn't love getting Thunder Waved. Aerodactyl can actually outrun +1 Gyarados and hit him with a Rock Slide, but Gyarados sometimes runs Jolly, which does outrun Aero, and they run Hidden Power Rock, which threatens Aero directly. And just the same, Aero doesn't love getting Thunder Waved. So I love Thunder Wave Gyarados for that reason. All the things you invite in get destroyed by Thunder Wave, so that's really good. Taunt Gyara is also interesting because Taunt is something Salamence doesn't get, and it can let you sometimes 1v1 Skarmory, which is pretty damn good for a Dragon Dancer. Hopefully they don't have Peck. Peck will 1v1 you, but Taunt 1v1 Toxic sets. Taunt's also good versus Milotic. It's good versus Suicune because they can't rest anymore. It's got a lot of useful application. Double Edge is good neutral damage. The problem with Gyarados, it's slower than Salamence. So Adamant Gyarados can't outrun Aero, which is bad, and I can't outrun Jolteon either, which is very bad because Jolteon just hits you with a Thunderbolt. However, Gyarados has other advantages that are very good. The other thing that sucks about Gyarados, lack of Rock Slide for coverage. So even if you do Dragon Dance, you can't hit Aero, so you need to run Hidden Power Rock as coverage, which is rough. It's not very good. But I think Gyarados is good. It's just limited in what it can. It's like alternate Salamence sometimes on specific teams. So it makes sense it's pretty low ranked. It doesn't come up that often, but on the teams it does see use on, I think it's very effective. Breloom's next, and this is crazy. Breloom has dropped off a cliff. Breloom was C rank above Jolteon, you know, among its peers. Now it's in the D tier, below Medicham. I mean, this is crazy. Breloom was a fairly recent rise to OU. Not that recent anymore, but recent relative to the amount of time and it became OU alongside Charizard, but maybe that was short-sighted because Breloom's sentiment is down the toilet. It's a grass fighting type, we know this, and it has access to Spore. That's its best trait. Spore, 100% accurate sleep inflicting move. So Breloom can get a lot out of just putting something to sleep and then click and Focus Punch, because they're asleep, they're helpless, you're about to do a big Focus Punch to something. The problem is that Breloom peters out very quickly, fizzles out, it is slow, it is destroyed by Salamence and Gyarados, sometimes Gengar too. It gets forced out once, and it's basically getting that one sleep and like one hit, and then it struggles to come in again, struggles to do a lot again. Sometimes it can go crazy, depending on the matchup. If it has Pursuit support to get rid of Gengar, you can get a lot out of it. You can also use it to lure in Salamence and punish it with Stun Spore to paralyze it. That's a pretty good option, same with Gengar, you paralyze them. Hidden Power Ghost is cool to hit Gengar. Leech Seed is an interesting option. I think it's a pretty good Pokemon. It's good on spikeless teams because it's a form of aggression that is not reliant on spikes, as you can put something to sleep. That's a momentum win. But Breloom is it gets huge short-term value and then it very, very quickly fizzles. So that's the problem with Breloom. And it's got big 4-move slot syndrome. You want Mach Punch for priority. That's a good thing going for Breloom. It's got Mach Punch, which can be good versus Tyranitar. Fast threats, but Breloom also sucks because it gets Doug trapped, so that's really tough. You get Doug eliminated. I can't disagree too much with this Breloom placement. My attempts to use Breloom have been unsuccessful, to be honest, so I can't really defend a Breloom that much, but maybe Breloom's metagame will develop more. Smeargle's up next. I think Smeargle should be above all of these. I rate Smeargle quite high. Smeargle, you all know, is a normal type with crappy stats, but it can learn any move in the entire game. And with any move in the entire game, usually you go max speed, Spore for the 100% accurate sleep, and spikes. Use it as a hyper offense spikes setter. And then you can run Explosion because of course you can run any move you want. And that's great momentum. Put something to sleep, set some layers, and then explode, go to a threat. One of the best openers you can hope for on a hyper offense team, honestly speaking. It's very powerful. And then the flex slot can go crazy. You can run Encore or something to trap things. You run Will-O-Wisp. Thunder Wave is really high impact. Whirlwind or something. There's also Baton Pass. Dragon Dance Smeargle is funny. Dragon Dance Spore can be funny. I don't think Smeargle lead is very good. It's got bad lead matchup against Lumberry leads or faster leads, but in the back pocket, a Smeargle can go crazy. And I think it is one of the best ways to run hyper offense in this metagame. So I honestly think I use Smeargle more than all three of the Pokemon above it here. Personally, I think I see it more often in tournaments. I feel like it's pretty good in tournaments. And it is pretty much just used on those hyper offense teams, but it is one of the cornerstones of those teams in my opinion. So I would put it higher than this. Jynx is next. Jynx is a sleep lead. Ice Psychic hits 317 speed max, which is pretty good. It's got Lovely Kiss, 75%. It's similar to Sleep Powder, 75 sleep move. And this is a sleep setter that is a powerful special threat. It's got high special attack, stab Ice Beam, stab Psychic, Calm Mind. So that's really good. You can start the game off with a serious bang if you run Jynx. Sleep something and then Calm Mind up, destroy various things, and sometimes get a lucky freeze. And Jynx is one of those Pokemon that can just win on the spot turn 1 sometimes, and it's very annoying. The Jynx metagame has evolved though, because Jynx can sometimes be used to actually force certain interactions. Blissey or Metagross pretty much always come in against Jynx, and then you can use that to actually just throw Jynx at them, die on purpose, bring in Doug for the trap. Special offense game plan is going to the moon. I mean, Metagross is not necessarily imperative to eliminate, but it's good to eliminate. It gets rid of their explosion. What you want to force in is Blissey though, and you can actually go even crazier with this and run Mean Look to trap them in so they can't get out of there. Once they win on Blissey, they're permanently in. And then you run Perish Song, and you actually stall the Blissey, and sometimes you don't even need Doug to get rid of the Blissey with Mean Look, Perish Song, Jynx. So Blissey's a pretty nice aggressive lead on special offense teams that forces the interactions you want to force. So in a meta sense, Jynx is quite nice. And we've seen Jynx a lot in tournaments recently. It's a pretty damn good way to run special offense. It's been very, very successful. So at the same time, you probably put Jynx around here just because that's all it does. It's a lead on special offense sometimes. You can't use Jynx anywhere else. It doesn't do anything else. But at that particular role, it's very good. It's relevant in the metagame. I would put it about here too, yeah. And Raikou is next. Raikou is UUBL, but it was once OU. It fell down. It's an electric type. Hits 361, the same speed as Starmie, maximum. And it's got great stats, Calm Mind and Thunderbolt, and it's just a really good Calm Mind sweeper. Problem with Raikou, Doug weak. Doug outruns it, is immune to Thunderbolt, KOs it in one hit. So that's really tough. You need support for that. Sometimes Porygon 2, or Doug punishes like Skarm, Salamence, whatever. But Raikou also sucks against Blissey. Blissey destroys it with Seismic Toss. You can't do anything. Sucks against Snorlax too. So you need some sort of way to overwhelm Blissey as well. And that's a lot to ask. At the same time though, Raikou can be a pretty damn good Pokemon in the right situation. If you do make way for it, if you get a good matchup, or you have set up for it in the end game, Raikou is so fast for such a good Calm Mind Pokemon. You think of other fast Pokemon, they don't have Calm Mind win condition status like this does. That's the reason you use it, is that it's fast, bulky, and it has the sweeping option of Calm Mind. It outruns Gengar. It is speed tying with Starmie. It's outrunning Zapdos, Salamence, Flygon. So the speed of this on such a good and bulky and threatening Pokemon is the reason to use it, but it has struggles in the metagame. Also sucks with Claydol. That's another thing. But ABR's been using it to success, building with it in creative ways, and with the right team, Raikou can seriously thrive. So it makes sense to see it ranked here. Maybe Raikou will rise back up to prominence in the future if we find good ways to use it. We'll see. And here's the E tier. I don't think I'll talk about everything here, but these are the Pokemon that have been officially ranked. It's pretty cool to see some of these. Let's take a look at the previous E tier and see if we got any new faces. Quagsire was not here before, so that's fun. Quagsire World First VR ranking. It's an alternative Swampert, water ground typing, but has water absorb, so it's immune to Suicune Surf and a lot of important hits like Starmie Hydro Pump too. So that can be really, really good. It has way worse stats than Swampert, but that water immunity and healing on getting hit by a water move is pretty significant. Is anyone else a new face? Was Ludicolo ranked before? Yes, it was in the D rank before. Ludicolo's here, maybe Ludicolo's gone down. It's a cool Swift Swim Pokemon with Leech Seed. Glalie holding on strong. Glalie still ranked. We love Glalie, folks. Check out my video about Glalie if you wonder what he does. He's an aggro spikes lead with good matchups. Slacking. Should Slacking be higher than this? Where was Slacking last time? F rank. Slacking won Gym Invitational. Slacking's got grand final status all over him. He peaked #1 in a historic run. He's been used. Is Slacking the top of E tier? Possible. Now, you can't put them above Hariyama or the Regis for sure. Those are the best. Those are the best ones. Vaporeon's here. Porygon 2 is damn low. I guess people don't love Porygon 2. It is hard to build with it. It does feel like it's difficult to fit everything on Porygon 2 teams. Good potential though. The Trace, the Arena Trap, tracing, and all that enables. Misdreavus is here. It has one job on Superman, but it does it well. Houndoom is okay as a Pursuit Trapper. With Flash Fire, good into fire types and Celebi Jirachi. The Camel is ranked. We love to see it. Fire Ground. Gengar and Zap switch in. Has Explosion. We love Weezing, don't we, folks? Weezing's one of my favorites. I love it. I love it. Steelix? I feel like Steelix stinks. To be honest, I don't like Steelix, but it's still ranked here. Has Steelix done anything good recently? I feel like I haven't seen Steelix, and I don't think it's very... I feel like many of these other Pokemon are better. And, yeah, these are all about right. I mean, these are... You probably do see these occasionally, all of them. It's pretty low for Hariyama. I feel like Hariyama's sentiment is damn low recently. This used to be like the new hotness, and everyone said Hariyama was amazing. BKC talked about how good Hariyama is and it should be OU and stuff. Now it's E rank. So maybe that was just hype. Maybe that was just, we were all wrong about that one. But Hariyama is still the best knockoff user. Good bulky fighting type with guts. I think it's good, but I suppose it fits on teams scarcely. But what do you folks think of this tier list for November? What do you think of the shifts? I mean, Breloom is way down. Metacham's pretty high up. Where do you think the meta is headed? Will we see a day where Skarm overtakes Tar? Will that happen? It's getting closer and closer. More non-Tar #1 submissions this time than ever before. And the sentiment around Tar is dwindling. ABR's spreading propaganda. So maybe there will be a day where Tar is no longer #1. I don't think it'll happen, but maybe. Maybe it's getting closer and closer. Do you think anything unranked here should have been ranked by the community? Lack of respect for Articuno? I think Articuno is better than many of these guys. I'm gonna be honest. Banette should be on. Can we get Banette ranked in the next one? I gotta qualify for VR next time so I can get Banette on there. Banette's good, man. Banette's good. Lack of respect for Banette, folks. And what do we think about... We got William. William could be on here. My favorite Pokemon. Muck is not even on the list. Come on, Muck is S tier. Are you guys kidding me? Let me fix this real quick. Muck is S. You idiots. I'm glad to see Sableye didn't cheat his way on here. He doesn't deserve it. Everyone else kind of sucks, though. Nothing else really deserves to be ranked. Maybe... Nah, nothing really. Maybe Arcanine. I could see Arcanine. Arcanine's pretty good. Exeg? No. Exeg is no good. Exeg can't do it. Lantern is over. The Lantern Renaissance is well over. We were wrong about that one. We were all wrong. There we are, folks. There we have it. Muck #1. What do you think? I'll catch you later.